The information provided on this podcast is for general informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your qualified health provider with any questions you may have. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. Reliance on any information provided here is solely at your own risk.
Welcome. This is Birth, Baby. Your hosts are Sierra Morgan and Samantha Kelly. Sierra is a birth doula, hypnobirthing educator, and pediatric sleep consultant.
Samantha is a birth doula, childbirth educator, and lactation counselor. Join us as we guide you through your options for your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum journey. Thank you to our listeners for your continued support. If you enjoy our content, please be sure to like, follow, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. This helps us gain visibility to other people that could benefit from listening in. Hello, everyone. Today we have Amber Frauenholtz with us, and she is a certified nutritional therapy practitioner, so NTP, restorative wellness practitioner, RWP. She has all these letters, y'all. She's fancy. And health coach who specializes in helping women feel their best through custom holistic health plans that start with food. She's passionate about helping others avoid the nutritional depletion and stress that accompanies being a woman in today's culture. And guess what? She's helped Samantha and I, which is so cool. We've really enjoyed working with her. So thank you for being here with us today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
We're so excited to have you on and share a little bit about what you do and how you serve women with our listeners. So to start us off, can you tell us what the heck a functional nutritionist is?
Yes, I can. And I'm so happy you asked because it is very confusing. I do have a lot of random letters at the end of my name. Like, what the hell does this mean? So functional nutrition is sort of similar to functional medicine. Like if you go to a functional medicine doctor, it's going to be a similar approach. It is more based in looking for the root cause of an issue versus just managing your symptoms. And I think one of the other big differences is I look at the whole body and not just like it in silos. So, you might go to a doctor for a specific reason, and then there's all these specialists, and they really just kind of think about the one thing that you're there for. But when you come and work with me, it's more of a holistic, I want to look at your whole life. Like, how do these all connect with each other? How is this like manifesting in the symptoms that you're experiencing? And then what can we do from a food, lifestyle, supplement-based approach to help bring things back into balance? So I'm not a doctor, so I don't treat or diagnose like illness, but instead I like to phrase it as I help you identify the roadblocks that are holding you back in your own healing journey, and I will help you remove those using those supports that I mentioned earlier. I do specialize in women's health. I started my business because I wanted to support women in the postpartum period. Like many of you, I'm sure out there listening, like I had a really rough first go at postpartum, and I just felt like there wasn't a lot of support out there beyond, the 6 weeks you get the check-in at your primary care. And I had postpartum anxiety and lots of things happening. And I used the sort of holistic modalities to help me get out of that funk. And I just wanted to do the same for other women. But now it's really grown to support women, in perimenopause, fertility. It just really doesn't matter where you are. It's women's health.
You guys, she's not kidding. She looks at freaking everything. I could not believe when we started working together, I was like, wow, I'm answering all of these questions that she's now going to analyze the answers to. It was really neat because it's so individualized. And both Samantha and I have gone through like this whole 12-week program with her. And it's been so neat to just learn about ourselves. So we know, not everyone has the same needs, right? So nutrition is not a one size fits all thing. Can you explain like why that is? Like why does it need to be something that somebody works with someone for or has these tests for? Why can't we just do certain things that will be good for everybody?
Yeah. So if you just scroll social media, you would get the exact opposite message, right? Like everyone is spouting like, oh, do a Whole30 or eat vegan or be someone who doesn't eat gluten. It's just all of these sort of broad recommendations. And I think that that is actually one of the biggest dupes in the health and wellness industry, that like you can just follow someone else's plan and like get the same results, because that's just not true. And one of the reasons why I liked my training so much is because it does emphasize the differences in culture, traditions, your budgets, like what you have access to, the specific makeup of your gut health, your microbiome, that's going to be special to you and the food that you eat. Your genetics are going to be different from everyone else. Where you live, like what you have access to in food. There's lots of people who live in areas where we call them food deserts. Like they really don't have access to fresh, wholesome foods. Your ethics play a role, your beliefs play a role. The list really goes on. And that's what creates this bio-individual approach. And of course, everyone is also experiencing different health issues, right? Like someone might come to me and they're burned out, feeling terrible, brain fog. And we do all this work and uncover, okay, well, it's actually probably rooted in your blood sugar and stress levels. But another person who's experiencing this exact same symptoms might come to me and we do all the data analysis and the lab work and we find, it's rooted in your gut health. You've got like all this opportunistic bacteria that's causing inflammation. Of course, it's going to bring, brain fog to the surface and stuff like that. Experiencing the same thing, but it's two different root causes, which means the approach is going to be different. And then I work with you to make sure I'm meeting you where you're at, right? So if you don't want to eat a lot of red meat, well, then I'm going to help you figure out, well, how can we meet the goals to fit your lifestyle, if that makes sense.
I'm over here kind of giggling because I remember our first intake and I was telling you like, I don't eat, by the way, I love vegetables, but I was like, I don't eat vegetables anymore because my stomach doesn't clearly not like them. I'm doing like the carnivore thing. And shouldn't everyone just do that? Like because I had heard somewhere that everyone should just do a carnivore thing. And you were like, no, that's not what's right for you. And I remember going, I'm sitting here doing what I accuse my grandfather of doing, which is saying everyone should be keto, like hardcore, 82 years old, everyone should be keto. And it's just not that simple. And, Samantha and I were both having similar, like you were saying, similar things that sucked about our existence for a while. And mine was definitely like, hers was more blood sugar stuff and mine was more gut health and like having this weird bacteria that we didn't even know, like I had heard of a long time ago, but wasn't even one of the super common ones. Like you were surprised I didn't have other things going on. So if you just played a guessing game on what's typical, we wouldn't have got it.
Yeah, totally. And that's why I really I went to school to try to get more of those letters out of my name so that I could do the lab work when women come to me, because it is so bio-individual. And that lab work that we do helps us like test and not guess. So if we didn't do the labs, then I would be hypothesizing. And sure, I can get a lot of information from analyzing all your paperwork and talking to you and your health history. But without the pointers towards like specific issues that come up in the lab work, then it really is like, okay, well, let's do this protocol for 3 months, see if you feel better. And if not, then I guess that wasn't it. And we got to try something different. So this really just kind of cuts to the chase. I'm like, okay, this is the thing. So now you can spend less time and we can get you results a lot faster doing the labs. I don't know if you want to talk about any of the specific labs that I run. Up to you guys.
We might have asked about it later. I don't remember in the order of our questions, but sure. Tell us like what the options are, because Samantha thought she wanted a different test. And you were like, actually, based on your answers to these questions, I think we should do something else. And we both just trusted you on what to do. And we were glad that we did.
Yeah. Well, so I'm a functional practitioner. So the labs that I offer are different from when you go to your primary care provider. And I think that's also a frequently asked question I get, like, how do these things differ? I like to frame it as when you go to the dermatologist, you can either get a cosmetic procedure or you can get a medically necessary procedure. And, insurance is going to cover the medically necessary one. They're not going to cover the cosmetic. That's what functional lab tests are like, because they are used for balancing, for optimizing, for identifying like where we can focus. They are not used for diagnosis, like, treatment, that kind of thing. And so that's why you can't go to like your PCP and ask for a GI map, for example, which is a gut health stool test. because insurance won't cover it and they wouldn't be able to get your insurance company to do that, right? So I do blood work, which is similar to like a PCP, but I look at the results differently. I'm using a optimization lens versus a are you sick lens. And so that's kind of the simplest way I can describe the difference between how I use labs in the blood work realm. And then of course we do stool testing with your gut health. And then I do hormone testing. So it's a Dutch like panel. And then I can also do like cortisol and things, food sensitivity, but those are the three main ones. Every client I work with, I want blood work because it's just like such a good foundational starting point. And then we can build from there.
Yeah, I think there's just so many things that you wouldn't even know that you should look for unless you were working with it. Like half of these tests I'd never heard of until, I started learning about them from you. So that's really interesting. I think that a lot of people don't really realize how much nutrition can kind of play in their lives, like the role that it can play. But especially when we're talking about supporting fertility and preparing the body for conception and pregnancy, and then even supporting like fetal development and pregnancy symptoms and postpartum and breastfeeding and all of these things. People don't really understand how big of a role nutrition and your body's, hormonal and gut health can play into that. So can you give us a little bit of insight on that side of it?
Yeah, of course. I like to think of it as so nutrition is basically the foundation for everything. Because if you do think about it, your body requires a ton of raw material in order to function on a daily basis, just to have energy, to create hormones, to do all of its just basic necessary, like autopilot stuff. And if you don't have the raw materials, and what I mean by raw materials are like the smallest components you can think of. So vitamins, minerals, protein, like the macronutrients, that kind of thing, then you can't do all those other functions, right? And so if you don't have that, then you're going to have dysfunction down the road. And of course, you're going to need a lot of raw material in order to build a baby and like create breast milk and have the energy to like get through the marathon that is birth and all the things. So we have to start with just like making sure you're getting enough food, making sure you're getting enough variety of the vitamins, all the things. I try to not overcomplicate it. So we could spend 30 minutes on or more or do multiple podcasts on like talking about vitamin A and zinc and all these things. But I feel like that's not intuitive for listeners of like a podcast like this. So I like to say, especially if you're in the fertility, postpartum, pregnancy space time of your life, it's really about asking yourself just like, how can I add more nutrients to my diet? And that's the question that I try to get you used to answering and like kind of build a habit of when you go into the kitchen, can you ask yourself, how can I add more nutrients to this? So if you're someone who's early postpartum and you just want a freaking bowl of cereal, you shouldn't feel guilty or like worried about cereal. Like it's fine. But the question that we're asking ourselves is, how can I add more nutrition or how can I add more nutrients to this? So maybe you add a scoop of collagen peptides, which is a protein powder, to your milk. So you get a little extra protein. And you're also going to add in like a little side of like carrots and hummus or something. So you get your treat, you get your cereal, but you also get some added nutrition, which is going to have some of the key building blocks we need on the side. So it's an additive, not restrictive approach. I do have just like a list of some of the top recommendations I make for early postpartum pregnancy, all the things. Should I go through?
Yeah, let's hear it. That's great.
Yeah. So I think, again, I don't want to overcomplicate it. So these are really broad, sweeping sort of recommendations. Number one is hydration, right? So just getting your water in, drinking enough water, and electrolytes. So a lot of people forget the electrolyte piece. Those are minerals that our body uses to move water in and out of our cell membranes, right? So if you kind of think back to 8th grade science or something, it's like osmosis, right? And so those minerals are like salt and potassium and magnesium, those kinds of things. And so if you drink in a lot of water, but you're deficient in minerals, then you're not actually absorbing water and you're just peeing a lot. So you notice like a lot of people are like, I drink so much water, but it makes me pee so much. Well, yeah, it's probably because you're mineral deficient and you're not actually like holding on to the water. I can't tell you how many times like clients be like, oh my God, I started adding electrolytes and now I don't pee as much. It's so weird. So anyway, so electrolytes, you can do a powder, you can get fancy, buy like a element powder or, whatever one you want. But all you really need is a pinch of sea salt
I
in
have
your
to
water.
say, this was one of my favorite things about working with you is the like logical explanations of sure, get the element if you want to, but like really you could do the sea salt. And those things make it much more accessible and attainable for some people because I also just don't really love the taste of those drinks. I just don't. Like I would rather just down some water with some sea salt in it?
Yeah.
And same with you saying like the balance thing you said earlier or like adding nutrition, not taking it away. That was probably the biggest thing that it changed my mindset while working with you was I just changed the way I looked at food. And I actually had I was surprised at how hard it was to get the extra calories and the extra protein and all of these things because I was eating before and I was actually gaining weight. And then I started eating the way you encouraged and in the order that you encouraged and thinking about food a different way and also drinking all the water you have to drink when you're taking supplements. And I was like, I'm
Yeah.
stuffed, And then I was
Yeah.
starting to lose weight just a side effect. Because my body was being able to work in a more optimal way. So sorry to interrupt you, but I just love that you're like, it's fine if you don't buy the expensive powder.
Yeah, it's all about meeting you where you're at, right? It kind of goes back to being like the bio-individual nutrition side of things. You don't have to be perfect. That's kind of another dupe of the health and wellness industry is that you get on social media and you get this idea, especially if you're our age and you were raised in like the 90s, early 2000s, you really feel like you have to be perfect to see results. And that is just not the case at all. The more important thing is just being consistent with something, right? So you pick hydration as your one thing you're going to focus on and you're just consistent with it. And you're going to get benefits from that. And every little new layer you add, it makes you feel even more better. You just get better and better over time. But yeah, so hydration. I like to recommend 50% of your body weight in fluid ounces for water, but that can be a lot of water if you are on the higher end of the scale. So I just aim for about 75 to 80 ounces. And then of course, if you're nursing or breastfeeding, you're going to be thirsty. So just listen to your body and drink your water. Some of the other things that you can do to make sure you're getting all the nutrition you need is prioritizing protein. So we did that with both you guys. I like these little questions that you can habitually get used to asking yourself when you eat. So another thing you can want to consider is what's my protein source, right? So every time you go in the kitchen, what's
I'm
my protein
laughing
source?
because Samantha was on vacation during her protocol and she sent me a picture one morning. I'm calling you out, Sam. This was so funny. I have to share. She had this drink that was an alcoholic beverage, but it had egg white in it. It was like a foamed egg white on top. And she was like, I think Amber would approve. This is protein.
I do approve. I do, especially, yes, I like it. I like it. Very
so good.
Blood sugar stabilizing. I like it.
It's great. Whole health.
And those egg white cocktails are so delicious because they're creamy and
they're the best.
Good choice.
Flexibility, making it fit into your life,
I love it. Yeah, protein is so important. And that is that's the probably common denominator with every single client I have ever worked with. They come in under eating protein. And it is because, to be fair, it is a newer thing, right? So in the past 5 years or so, the science really is out there now to support that we need a lot of protein in order to maintain our muscle mass, in order to balance our blood sugar, to remain full, feel that satiety feeling throughout the day. There's just so many benefits to it. Also, I think you're going to ask me this later, but for breastfeeding, protein is going to be one of the number one things that you want to focus on. You need enough amino acids to create breast milk. So what does that look like in action? If you don't have to track or anything, but just aiming for about a palm size amount of whatever your protein source is at every meal. And then also having protein when you have snacks, right? So how am I going to add nutrients to this? Well, you can do so by adding protein to a lot of things, right? So if you're having cereal, you can do the collagen in your milk. You can have hummus with your carrots, stuff like that. The guideline, if you are curious, is whatever your ideal body weight is, that would be the amount of grams of protein you want to aim for in a day. I know that can be a lot. That can be a lot. And this also, the math doesn't always shake out, right? So if that's just a guideline. if you're coming up with really high numbers there, then perhaps just aiming to get at least 100 grams, that's a good place to start. Yes.
None of
So
us should
protein.
be aiming to be 100 pounds, but 100 is a good
Yes.
number. Um,
Yeah.
So we've talked about postpartum, and like when you did your intro talk part with us, you were talking about how like that was your main focus when you started all of
Yeah.
this. And some people have, different definitions of what postpartum is. So could you kind of say when you're talking about nutrition and being postpartum affecting your body, because we all know that like our hormones are changing and all of those things when we're postpartum, what is that range of time you're talking about?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a really interesting question because in the so for me, I consider like postpartum really if your kid is like under the age of 5, I like it really impacts you for a long, long time. But the interesting piece is that time frame, say like a year after you have your baby, that's what I'm really thinking about. If you are unable to replenish your nutrient stores and get a hold of your stress and all the things, those changes can impact you up to 10 years later. Right. So you can be feeling burnout and sick and terrible up to 10 years after you have your kid. And it's because of that sweet little baby, sucking you dry when you were pregnant and postpartum, quite literally sucking you dry. Because your body prioritizes the nutrients for baby, right? So if you're not getting enough raw material, then your body will start to break down your stashes of those things, give that to your baby because your baby is going to be prioritized, thank goodness. But then that leaves mom with none. And so then you give birth and you're deficient already, right? So we really want to focus on rebuilding those nutrient stores. And getting a hold of stress too, because obviously that's going to be a big component. But if anyone wants to learn a lot more about that specific time frame, I do recommend, and it's a little bit old now, but it still holds up. It's the Postpartum Depletion Cure by Oscar Serlac. It is a great book, and a lot of the recommendations I make are from that book. But he goes through the science of what happens when you are postpartum, all the nutrients that you're deficient in, and what that can cause, right? And then the nutrients to prioritize and things. So I do recommend that, and I can go into some of those too if you want me to.
Yeah, that's really there's just so much to think about when it comes to postpartum. I think I always get a lot of questions about like, breastfeeding and what do I need, to be eating to produce the best breast milk. And I'm like, well, what you're eating isn't really going to produce, like, it's not going to change the content so much of your breast milk, but it's going to change how you feel when you're eating and when you're breastfeeding, and your body does need more calories when you're breastfeeding and you are depleted more easily. So it's more about how are you going to manage all of that with breastfeeding and different things like that. One thing I know that we kind of talked about with my protocol was how I felt after having, a pretty difficult pregnancy with my daughter and then breastfeeding her for a long time. So, I'm obviously a few years out from having her. She's 5 now. But it, kind of seems like getting the right foods or getting enough foods sometimes can be just as difficult now as it was then. Maybe part of the time because I'm just eating, the leftover chicken nuggets off of their plates at the end of the day. But what would you say are the biggest takeaways for someone in my stage of life and this stage of, not quite a postpartum, but still kind of postpartum. And what things would you recommend prioritizing?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And so relatable. I mean, I feel like all of us have, if you've had kids, then you can relate most likely. And your listeners too, who are listening right now. So the first thing I would say is not even related to food. It is actually like stress and mindset piece of the puzzle, because, and I know it kind of makes me want to gag when I say stress, because it's such like a zeitgeist like term, like reduce your stress. Like, how am I supposed to do that when I have, kids, like children? But stress actually comes from so many different directions, right? And what we want to do, especially with my clients, is like, it's a holistic view. Like, where can you take little tiny bits from everywhere so that you can just create a little bit more capacity in your proverbial like cup that you pour from. And so part of that is setting boundaries. It's like trying to get, not focus on like cleaning your house, like whatever. Can you delegate some things? Can things drop off your plate? Learn how to say no more, like prioritizing sleep, la da 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 da. What are those self-care things that you need to do in order to feel like yourself? So that would be number one, because that is going to be kind of a foundational piece. Number two is like figuring out your sleep. Can you get more of it? And can you get higher quality sleep? Then number three is focusing on the nutrition piece. And I want to just remind you, back to earlier in the conversation, it was that additive, not restrictive approach. So if you feel overwhelmed, that is where you want to focus. Like, don't worry about the things that you feel like you shouldn't be eating. Just worry about the things that you can add in order to feel better in the long run. And it's a lot of the things we've already talked about. So prioritizing protein, and that's going to help you balance your blood sugar, which will primarily be like the biggest impact on your energy levels. So just having protein, avoiding eating naked carbohydrates. So a lot of us like are hungry in the afternoon and we just want to go eat like a bag of chips or that bowl of cereal, right? But what that does is that's a naked carb. There's no protein and fat that close on the carb. And so that just spikes blood sugar, and that can give you this real anxious feeling, and then you crash, right? And you get on this like hamster wheel. So we want to avoid that. So not eating naked carbs. So adding your hummus with carrots or your protein powder to your milk, like, having that added there. And then after protein would be fiber, right? So can you just increase vegetable intake? I don't care where it comes from. I don't care how you do it. Just can you eat more fruits and veggies in your diet, right? And what you'll notice over time is when you follow that additive versus restrictive approach, a lot of the stuff that you initially thought, oh, I shouldn't be eating, it actually just falls away. Kind of like what Sierra was saying, like, because you don't have room for it. Because you're full. You're eating enough protein, so you're full. You don't have room for the cookies or whatever, and you didn't even have to restrict, which is so lovely. Let's see, what else did I write down? And then I think the last thing I'll leave you with on that question is just really trying to hone in on that mindset of letting it be easy. Because a lot of people have this belief that it has to be complicated. But it really doesn't have to be complicated. It can be easy. It can be easy. So whenever I start to feel overwhelmed, I just tell myself, like, let it be easy. What if this was easy? What would I do next? And just that little shift can really help, because it doesn't have to be like a fancy home cooked meal. You can go to the store these days and get really nice processed frozen like meals, that have great ingredients that you can lean on, like Kevin's Natural Foods, Primal Kitchens. Like, there's all kinds of options. It does not have to be complicated in order to get your nutrients in.
I think that's so important, because I think with a lot of these, I don't know if I want to call them fad diets, but a little bit, like Whole30, for example. I did Whole30 a few years ago, and it was really helpful for me. It helped me feel good. It helped me kind of reorganize how I was approaching food and eating, but it's not something that you can maintain for a long period of time, because the goals with Whole30 is that you're making every single meal. Like, you have to know exactly, you want raw chicken and the raw ingredients, and then you're making everything. And as a mom of 2 kids who owns way too many businesses and does way too much stuff, that is not attainable for me. I need easy. I need simple. I need to get in, get it done, and move on. And I don't have time to sit and make every meal. And so as I've thought about, like, how am I going to approach eating? How am I going to make sure that I'm feeling good with my nutrition and all of that? I do need things that are simple. So having, the easy things that I can grab, a protein shake that I'm adding collagen into, and adding my, veggie pack that I get from Costco in there, and I can get 50 grams of protein in that breakfast smoothie in the mornings.
Yeah.
And that's so helpful for me, because I can get that, and then I can run out the door to go do my 10 million things that I have on my list that morning. It's just so huge.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
We're just like pumping you up now, because like one of the things that you told me when we worked together that really stuck with me is, because I was like, sometimes I go to this local coffee shop to have a meeting or something, and I don't want to sit there and eat like a giant bowl while I'm talking to someone. So I just get like a muffin. And then I know that that's a terrible choice for me, because it's basically cake, because their gluten-free muffins are delicious, and it's like chocolate or blueberry and it's sugar. And you're like, it's okay if you have that. And in my head, I'm going, what are you talking about? And you're like, but eat a hard-boiled egg first. Like, prioritize protein, right? And I found, like you said, that those other things fell off because if I wanted some ice cream, I was making myself have a handful of nuts first. And then I found myself not really caring about the ice cream. Like I would eat a couple bites, but I definitely ate less than I would have, but not having to restrict and still getting to have those things or, share those things with my kids because every once in a while they want to have a treat and I want to be able to have it with them. And I don't want them to have a mom who's always saying no because that's not healthy for my body, which it's not. And my kids definitely know that. But being able to have that balance was huge. And the whole process of working together, Amber has this little thing where we've got to talk on Voxer and we would like text back and forth and she would check in and some days she'd be like, so how are you doing? And I was like, I'm totally sucking right now. Like, let's just be honest. It's been a crap weekend. We had family in town. I've eaten out every day. Like it's been bad. And you're like, it's fine. What have you done that's good? And you really made me think about what it was and I was like, well, we walked a lot and I don't usually walk at all. So I hate walking. And we did because we had family in town and you're like, see, you exercised more than you usually would. And that's good. Like, and that's that mindset piece, right? So mindset, movement, and then, prioritizing protein and all of those things. But I really loved working with you. And, it was so cool to change the way that I thought about food. And then I got to share that with my 14-year-old daughter. And she got to see that like I was still eating. I want her to see that I'm still eating the ice cream because you know how 14-year-old girls are with like body image and all of these things. And I don't want her to think that you just can't enjoy food. But after hearing all of this, maybe someone would be like, oh, well, now I'm kind of interested in what it might be like to work with a functional nutritionist. So if they did want to reach out to you and work with you, and we'll put this in the show notes too, but how would they get in touch with you? And what are those first steps?
Yeah, of course. So I just want to comment on what you said though. So thank you for the kind words. I'm so happy that you guys had a positive experience because, again, kind of going back to when we grew up, we're all similar age. And all the women that come into my practice are so brainwashed by culture and they feel so bad about their bodies and they feel so much shame about wanting to eat like a bowl of ice cream at night and all the things, but it just doesn't have to be that way. And that's just such propaganda, right? Like, so I love that. Thank you for saying that. If someone wanted to work with me, the best way to get in touch is either my website, so amberdawnwellness.com, or on Instagram. So I'm very active on Instagram. You can just send me a DM. It's at amberdawn, DAWN_wellness. So you can find me there. And then just also going back to what we were talking about before about meal planning and like making it easy, keeping it simple. I think I have a freebie that they can access on my website. It is a meal planning guide and it's got all of my like meal planning hacks on how to do like 1-ingredient meals, right? So like you have a protein, you have a frozen veggie, and you have a pantry staple. You combine them and you have enough nutrients, but it was super easy, right? So tips like that. And I think one of the number one self-care things you can do is just spend the 30 minutes on a Sunday afternoon thinking about what am I eating next week? And so it just kind of teaches you how to do that when you have a family and you're feeding a bunch of people. So you can find that on my website. Yeah. And I would love to hear from your listeners. So yay.
This has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. And you gave a lot of free information here. I didn't expect you to give away so many of your little secrets. So we really do appreciate you sharing those things with our listeners and the time that you've spent with us. We've loved it.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on Birth, Baby. Thanks again to Longing for Orpheus for our music. You can look him up on Spotify. Remember to leave a review, share, and follow wherever you get your podcasts. See you next week.